Hello everyone, this is Queerish, a podcast by Oslo Pride. I'm Alex Benjamin, host of this podcast, and today I'm honored to have with me Minister Anette Trettebergstuen, Minister of Culture and Equality in Norway.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
On behalf of Oslo Pride, I thank you for accepting our invitation on such a short notice, despite your busy schedule. Today, we are going to talk about inclusivity. Society has to do whatever to ensure that benefits and opportunities are given equally to all its members. No one should be left behind or excluded due to differences, no matter what those differences are. Everyone is accorded the benefits and opportunities and treated the same way. One way to do so is to promote and practice social justice, equal rights, and fairness in society among its members. All concepts and measures relating to it must be actively pushed and encouraged. We must banish all forms of discrimination, racism, and exclusivity for the benefits of everyone. One way to promote social justice and equal rights is by practicing inclusivity of all its forms and aspects. But what is inclusivity? How can we promote social justice and equal rights and opportunities for all? What are the benefits and what the aspects of society are in dire need of inclusivity? Those questions and more, we're going to try to answer them during today's episode with our guest, Minister Anette Trettebergstuen. We hear so often the term diversity and inclusivity, and I think sometimes people mix up between diversity and inclusivity. Could you define a little bit?
Diversity is obvious that it means that we are. I would say that diversity for me means that we need to think about people in society. It's about celebrating and using, in a way, the fact that we are all different, and that that's a fact. And we have to make sure that every area in the society reflects that. To be a unique and real diverse society means that you have to build down the barriers for those who are not that visible or not taking part in all those different arenas in society. What do you think?
I think inclusivity is the mindset. We can measure diversity, but we can't measure inclusivity.
Yeah,
because diversity, you could have a team in a ministry, for example, different gender, sexuality, ethnicity. That's diversity. But inclusivity, if the measures that we're following are actually inclusive to everyone.
Yeah, it's both a goal, it's a mindset, it's values, actually. Yeah, I agree on you on that.
Also, when we talk about inclusivity, we always come to this like it's a battle for justice and battle for including everyone. We always have to come to the fact that we need to fight and show people that we are here, we're oppressed back home, we had to come to Norway. So we always need to talk about our struggles. We always have to fight. Don't you think it's time that we have inclusivity just because we're human? We don't have to go fight for it and talk about it all the time.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and I think that's also a sign of how little inclusive the society actually is. Because, as you say, you have to fight for your rights. You have to remind people of your struggles and your background to be included. And why do you have to do that? It shouldn't be like that. I think we need to work for a common goal, to create a society where inequality and diversity is something that are appreciated, that everyone sees that the society, when we try to use all our backgrounds, differences, resources, that everyone gets more freedom, everyone gets a better society when we do that. And I think that the fact that you have to always remind people, fight for your rights or your place in society, it's obviously an example that we're not even close to being there.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm gonna talk a little bit about design inclusivity. When we choose something, usually we're biases because we always choose what we like. And when we design, we're also biased. We design things that fits us, even unconsciously if we don't mean it. And in the process, we forget sometimes non-binary when it comes to toilets, for example. We forgot people with disability. What is your ministry policy to have a more design inclusivity?
Well, that is in the core of what my ministry and me as a minister works for, actually, that these things should come in a natural way. But it doesn't. You see that people with different backgrounds, LGBT people with disabilities, people in every level of society, in every area of society, we lack this, what can I call it, inclusivity, and it's mainly because of the structures that are keeping people out. And it takes time to change people's opinions, people's mindset, but the way we create society in many ways, it's more easy to try to correct or to change those structures. So that's why we used to use politics, we use the law to make sure that, you know, the structure shouldn't keep anyone out. When it comes to like discrimination laws, for example, or how we build buildings, who do we leave behind, who do we think of? In every way, that's our goal, actually. So that's what we are, that's in the core of what we're working on.
So I think one of the examples that I mentioned, toilets, because I still see in a lot of establishment in Norway, the typical female picture and the typical male picture, but that doesn't include a lot of people, and so many people just feel excluded.
Yeah, first of all, I think it's too bad that they still have to face that. But on the other hand, we see that in most new buildings, clubs or schools or different areas of society, people think about that, and it gets more natural to have like unisex toilets and etc. And that's more inclusive, and I think that's a good thing. But as you say, this is not one place everywhere, and we have this we had this dialogue with all the municipalities, with the public services, schools and etc. When we try to remind them to think diversity in everything that they do, also when it comes to the typical practical structures. But we have a way to go.
Inclusive language refers to the appropriate use of languages in referring to the marginalized and discriminated various races and minority. For instance, it also includes a gender sensitivity to language use when referring to members of the LGBTIQA+. How can we promote language that will tear down all these invisible barriers? How can we make sure that even when it comes to the language that we use in our daily life, no one will feel excluded or discriminated?
I think that the easy but hard question to that is to listen to what people want to be called, or how they want to be titled, actually, and respect that. And I think for many people, they have like this fear of getting into that. I always, when I'm out speaking to groups, be it in schools or workplaces, and I talk about LGBT plus rights, there's always someone like, so could you just, what's the letters for again? And they're quite like shy, and maybe they really don't want to ask that because it's shameful. But I try to say that don't be shameful to ask. We want you to ask, and it's okay to not know everything, to not have this knowledge. But just ask, and then we can get really good conversations about what does this mean and why is it so. So I want really to build down the fear of discussing and asking, and I want people to ask, why do you want to be called a trans person, for example, or what does intersex really mean? Because I think in that way we could tear down some prejudice. But when it comes to, and that's the way to like educate the people to be able to use to use all these terms that is important for people's lives.
Do you think there's enough job done at school today to?
Not at all. Not at all. Not in the education, but so it's really important to get this more. We have to educate the teachers better, so that they want to and have the knowledge to get into these discussions. So that's important, and we're working on that. But also like giving the people that are the experts on how to develop knowledge, like Rosa Kompetanse, the opportunity to do more, because we see that this is really, really helpful to make people understand, oh, what is this about? Oh, okay, and then they understand this is not dangerous. It's not. It's not something we should fear.
People who face violence, imprisonment, or other type of discrimination in their home country, usually they flee seeking a better life. One of the examples is people leaving their countries because of their sexual orientation. A lot of people, when they come to Europe, they assume that this is the end of their struggle, but they are faced with another long period of struggles and setbacks. I'm giving an example, Norway. When we talk about inclusivity, queer refugees are part of this society, but so many still feel that they are excluded. The first question, how can we extend this social justice to include queer refugees?
Well, that's really is a question. It's a double question actually, or it's a group of people that obviously face a double kind of discrimination, because refugees in Norway are heavily discriminated on. It's a lot of prejudice, it's a lot of non-working rights, it's a lot of lack of rights in society. We don't cope with that in a good enough way. And when you come as a queer refugee, of course you have all your struggle from at home with you, your fears, obviously, your way of living a hidden life. So it's like a double boundary to be accepted into society. And I think we have to acknowledge that that it's really, really vulnerable. And we have to look for that, because it shouldn't be your job to go out and say, I'm a refugee and I'm gay. Because that, in many cases, and for many people, would just be too much and too dangerous. But you should be able to be picked up and helped without having to risk too much. So that's really, really that's actually queer refugees is one of the political areas that we acknowledge that we have to do more. Yeah, and that's also one of the priorities for me as a Minister of Equality. Of course, I can't do that job alone. I have to work with the Minister of Integration and the Foreign Ministry, etc. But we really have that on our agenda.
I spoke to a lot of people, and there's so many questions. I know probably you won't be able to answer a lot of them because they're not within your ministry. But one of the questions is one asylum refugee comes like LGBT, they have to stay in a mutak where they face homophobia, discrimination. There have been some violence, sexual harassment also in some incidents. And most of the time, the process is like they have to wait for 2 years before they get an answer.
Yeah, and that's exactly one of the usual things that happens. That we're not able to protect vulnerable people, because if you come as a queer refugee, you're obviously vulnerable, and you have to be protected from risks, and where you stay and with whom is of course really important for that. So that's one of the areas that we have to do more.
The most important process in their asylum cases is how to prove that you're gay. Aren't we stereotyping and discriminating? And then stereotype is the opposite of inclusivity, because when a refugee is asked this question, how can you prove that you're gay? How can you prove?
I know, exactly. And that is one of the many, I would say, paradoxes that still goes on. It's a really hard question. Yeah, but I know, I totally agree. It's
What do you think how this process should start?
How do you prove that you are you? It's I don't know. What do you think?
I guess.
But I also think that one of the reasons why this still goes on is obviously that it's being done to a group of people that have a fragile voice. I wouldn't accept that. You wouldn't accept that. But these people have to accept that from the government bodies. And I think, it's really something to discuss. Yeah. How do we do this? Yeah.
Do you think the Pride is also a way of protesting these rights, for getting these rights?
Pride is both a celebration of our freedom, our rights, and it's a thank to all of those who have fought for our rights, but it's a protest march that we have to use the opportunity to make people aware that we still have a lot of work to be done. So yes, obviously.
How's the ministry monitoring that the homophobia and sometimes the violence in some very limited cases in Norway, but still happen against LGBTIQ+?
When it comes to direct violence, this is something that, of course, is sorted under the police government and the Justice Department, which is, have the responsibility for monitoring these things, that get the cases registered and so when it comes to the hate crime paragraph, for example. But we have you face this in many different areas of society and maybe not that visible as the police can handle. We are now going to refresh a strategy for anti-racism, anti-homophobia, anti-Islamophobia, which is placed under the Ministry of Labour. And this is something that we, of course, work on in the government as a total, because it's not only my responsibility, it's not the only responsibility for the Ministry of Justice, it's not only the responsibility for the Ministry of the Schools, it's something that happens in every area. And we see that is one of the most, I think, terrifying things, that we see that racism, homophobia, all these things are it's growing, and we see that not only in our neighboring countries and over the world as a whole, but we see it in Norway as well, and we have to take that seriously and have to work against it. And I'm really happy now that we have a government that says this loud and clear out, that we have racism in Norway. We have homophobia, we have Islamophobia. We have to target it and really fight it.
We're celebrating this year 50 years since decriminalization of homosexuality in Norway. What's your message to the LGBTQI+ community?
Well, first of all, as you know, on behalf of the government, the Prime Minister and I, we have made this official apology for the law. That was abolished 50 years ago. And I think that's important because many people who was threatened, who was imprisoned, who was living in fear, living a hidden life, are still alive today, and those people deserve a formal apology. And even though the law was abolished 50 years ago, we know that the values behind the law lived on for decades after, and we still see it in society, because it's not the case that every LGBT person lives a free life, free from discrimination, free from hate, free from bullying. So I think it's a really important statement to make, to say we're sorry on behalf of the government. And I would also thank the queer LGBT movement, all of you that every day are activists working for more freedom, for better rights.
If you're given the chance to invite people to come to Oslo Pride, look at your camera, and what would you say to them?
Please come to Oslo Pride. This is going to be a huge celebration of love, of freedom. It's been 2 years since we were able to celebrate Pride, but we're not only celebrating, we're also reminding people, and we are going to be visible and speak up about all the areas in society where we have to still keep the fight going. So it's going to be important and fun, so please come.
We must promote inclusivity everywhere to ensure that discrimination and exclusion becomes thing of the past. The fight for greater inclusivity is only a part of the overall fight the LGBTIQA+ are fighting for attaining social justice, equal rights and opportunities for all. If ever, victory in the fight for inclusivity will indicate whether we can have more success or more setbacks in our fights for parity in society. Thank you, Anette, for joining us today.
Thank you very
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next month in another episode. Thank you.